afternoon and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding the light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. To represent Black excellence today, we have Mr. James L. Walker Jr., attorney at law, board member and general counsel for the Bronze Lens Film Festival, and owner of Walker and Associates, LLP, a leading general service law firm in the greater Atlanta area. Welcome to My Harlem Portrait, James.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So that our viewer know how we met, for full disclosure, we met in London and we were both invited to the West End opening of Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations, invited by Alia Jones-Harvey and Stephen Byrd, founders of Front Row Productions, the most important Black leading producers on Broadway and the only Black producers on the West End. There, I discovered that your interests are very eclectic and they span over a wide range of fields: practicing law, investing in show business, opening restaurants, mentoring young people. And this is why I asked you to be on my show, because you are a real role model and for young people and an example for youngs to follow and imitate. So thank you for being here. Since we just talked about Broadway, let's start with Broadway. What prompted you to invest in theater and specifically in Broadway?
Well, I had started with Tyler Perry plays and David Talbot plays about 30 years ago. A lot of people don't know I was a promoter for years, promoting their all up and down the East Coast. Some call it the Chitlin circuit. I call it just good old, Black comedy, Black humor, or Black plays that we had a lot of fun with. I had a client named Dietrich Hicks. I had a client named Mama I Want to Sing. And I worked with all these plays for years before I became an entertainment lawyer. And even after I became an entertainment lawyer, I've always had somebody in a Tyler Perry play, whether it was in New York, Atlanta, California. I've got now probably 10 clients who either are in front of the camera for Tyler Perry or behind the camera for Tyler Perry or doing casting for Tyler Perry. So I've always been in this play space. And it just seemed after 30 years of doing it, Broadway was the next evolution. It was just the next door that I needed to figure out how to knock down. So now we are in 7 plays on Broadway as well as in Europe, as well as a part museum at Broadway, Museum of Times Square, Museum of Broadway at Times Square.
That is fantastic. I was missing this piece of your career, the Tyler Perry, which is not a small one, right?
I tend to forget all the work we did in the 80s and 90s behind the scenes as a promoter, as an agent, and then as a lawyer in the early 90s.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit, which plays are you involved in? Because that's pretty interesting.
Sure. I went from Mama I Want to Sing in the 90s to now Ain't Too Proud, Piano Lesson, Camelot, a couple of the MJ plays. We have the Broadway National Tour in Europe. I'm in a couple of those. What else? I'm forgetting somebody.
Sinatra
the musical, which opens, I think it opened in October for a month, and then it reopens in Europe in January or February. I got to check with Stephen and Alia, who I should give deepest respect to Stephen Byrd and Alia Jones, who brought me in about 2 years ago into this Broadway space as an entertainment lawyer and as a guy who had been doing plays for years. But Sinatra, Ain't Too Proud, Piano Lesson, Camelot, MJ, and Here Lies Love. Yeah, how could I forget Here Lies Love? It's so much fun.
Yeah, I saw most of those, and they are all amazing shows, of course, because as you said, when Alia, Harvey Jones, and Stephen Byrd are involved, it's always wonderful because they did Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, they did A Streetcar Named Desire. I mean, they are pioneers in this field.
They're pioneers, and I'm truly humbled to work under their tutelage. And as a partner, investor, and just everything we're doing, I'm just humbled to learn this Broadway stage as opposed to the countless other stages I've been on.
Wonderful. So let's go to your law practice, which also reflects your eclectic nature because it includes tax, no-profit, entertainment law, television contract, litigation, business law, intellectual property, corporate law. Tell us about that.
Sure. I started practicing law in the mid-90s. After being in the play game and the concert game for about a decade, I rolled into law school and started studying entertainment law. And when I got to Howard, I was fortunate. I had a guy named Spencer Boyer who had taught all of these top entertainment lawyers in the 70s. So I got him in the 80s and the 90s, took me under his wing, and I came out of law school, went to a big firm. That firm didn't do entertainment law, so I built a department there. And after 2 years, we were at a crossroads of, do we staff up the department, or do I go on my own? And through a mutual agreement, I decided to just go on my own because they didn't want to really build up that department. It wasn't something they were into. They were old school, white shoe corporate firm. They didn't do entertainment law. They didn't do intellectual property, but they did teach me tax law. They did teach me corporate law. They did teach me wills and trusts and estate law. So when you're representing an entertainer, you're basically doing all of those things. You're teaching an entertainer a little bit about their taxes. You set up a nonprofit for them. You set up their LLCs. Sometimes they're buying restaurants, they're buying businesses, they're setting up record labels. You're doing all that corporate work. So I basically just brought that corporate training into an entertainment law practice. And I was fortunate to go from the concerts, the plays, to, you know, the Aretha Franklins of the world who started hiring us to do their legal work.
What you're telling me is so incredible, because one thing that I know is that entertainers were not so protected in the old days. You
Correct.
are someone who is protecting your clients.
Yeah, we have, on the litigation side, we discovered that many of these artists were in very one-sided bad contracts. And a lot of us hear that when we talk about TLC and Toni Braxton. There have been movies made about that. So we stepped in, got with a bunch of lawyers who litigated full-time, and we started litigating against record labels. And as of today, the end of 2023, we have probably gotten about 260, 270 artists out of bad contracts, whether it be a bad management contract, a bad producer agreement, a bad recording contract, a bad production agreement, or a bad distribution agreement. Those are kind of the 5 main contracts that you see as an entertainment lawyer. And big firms, small firms who just do contracts, they will call us to say, hey, we need to litigate this contract to get so-and-so out of it. So we then step in and do what we do in terms of getting the artist released, getting the artist monies paid back, and making sure they're not in a 10-year, 20-year contract.
This is amazing. Of all these important work you're doing, tell us maybe 1 or 2 cases that you consider the most important ones, those you had most problems or those you had most fun with.
I was 2 years out of law school, and a group named Men of Standard called me in Connecticut, and they were signed to Malico down in Mississippi, an old, good old boy, Mississippi kind of record label. And they wanted to go on and do their career, and they signed a contract that they would have had to sell 2-3 million records to make a penny.
Oh,
so we then and got them out of that contract, filed a federal action. We basically took that case on in 95 or 96, and it just opened up the floodgates of artists calling me who were in similar bad contracts. So that was the 90s. Then fast forward to 2005, we sued Sony.
Oh, wow.
And we got in there. Everybody told us we couldn't do it, but they eventually settled the case, and we were very pleased with the outcome of that case. So those would be 2 of, I think, the highlights, 95 and 2005. And then 2015 or 2020, we had to sue the artist her on behalf of Take Six, and we just settled that one. So if you look historically, 95, 2005, 2015, 2020, every 5 or 10 years, we're having to file one of these kind of landmark cases. And they, thank God they've settled favorably for us, but we're always the bad guy because we have to, at least to a certain part of the industry,
Yes.
because we come in and be the guys to say, hey, this ain't right. Now, we don't feel like we're the bad guys. We feel like we're doing kind of God's work, and we kind of consider it our civil rights work to make sure these artists are not locked into these 10-year, 20-year contracts where you got to sell 2 million records to break even. And then once you sell 2 million, you're only getting 20 cents a record thereafter. So if you sell 5 million copies and you're getting 10 or 20 cents, you might see $500,000, but they might see $30 million gross, and you might get $500,000 of that. And then the $500,000 you're going to get, they're going to charge everything out of that. So you make an album for me today, Miss Maria, and I tell you, Maria, you sold 2 million copies. We grossed $20 million, but on your 2 million sold, you get 20 cents a record. Wow. So we owe you $500,000, but we spent 2 million to make your record. So we take your $500,000 and we apply it against the 2 million we spent. Guess who's in debt?
You owe us.
You're in debt.
Wow.
You're at $1.5 million negative, $1.5 million in debt, even though you sold 2 million records. This was the story of TLC. They sold millions of records, but the way their contract was written, everything came out of their pot. So if they had a pot that was supposed to pay them $500,000 on 10 million records, they spent $3 million to make one of their videos alone. Just that video cost would eat out whatever monies were due to them. So we fight hard to educate the artists, to empower the artists. We've organized conferences. I try to write articles all the time. I taught entertainment law. I have a book out that artists use all the time. I try to do everything I can to just make sure artists know, look, this is what you're getting into. This is what's going on. You need to really understand it's bigger than performing on stage.
It's a very, very fascinating part of the industry there, because we know also that the Black artists have always been particularly in disadvantage because of this. So what you are doing is really, you are the civil rights leader of the entertainment business.
I say that, thank you for that, those kind words, because I tell people all the time, when I went to law school, I thought I would be Thurgood Marshall and fighting civil rights cases. And with due respect, none of us could beat Thurgood Marshall, but I thought I would follow in the steps of him and great civil rights guys. Johnny Cochran was a mentor when I was at Court TV, and I would look up to him. But my civil rights battle is entertainment industry. Yes. That's what my civil rights fight is. It's not the cops, unfortunately doing what they do, or the school systems, or, racism in housing. I support those 150%, but my lane that's never really been on before is fighting for these people in the music side, the Black artists and the Latino artists and any group that's not in the majority that needs our help to protect them.
And this is the fundamental thing, because Black America, the music of America is Black music.
We are the soundtrack of the 19th and 20th century. We are clearly the soundtrack of this century and the 20th century. We have been the soundtrack, whether you go from blues and hymns out of slavery, whether you come up through jazz and bebop through Billie Holiday, whether you come through rock and roll in the 50s and 60s of Chuck Berry, and then the Motown sound, whether you come to R&B and soul music in the 70s, whether you come through the 80s and we hit hip hop, whether we come through the 90s and we hit New Jack Swing, whether we then come even to the current where we got trap music, these rap artists like Trap, and all of this, and house music, all of this is Black music. Yes. From the 1900s all the way to present 2023, we are the soundtrack of America, our music, right out of slavery. But we don't typically get paid for it. Even Scott Joplin, the great piano player, his sheet music wasn't owned by him. Many others exploited his music. You look at Billie Holiday, these catalogs that are playing all the time with Billie Holiday, I wonder if her heirs or family members or descendants or whatever are getting any piece of that. So we have other lawsuits we're quietly working on now that are going to shake up the industry. There's some other labels out there that we know have been ripping off artists for a while, and we're just assembling the team to strike, in the next year or two against those labels. It's a lot of work when you do it. It's not an overnight thing. So you have to spend countless months doing research and countless months figuring out what's the game plan and how we're going to go about doing this. And it's to a point now where at least we can get labels to sit down before we have to file suit. But we have no problem with filing the suit, financing the suit, and fully carrying the suit to full maturity if we have to bring them to their knees.
And the reason why you can now get the label to sit down is because of all the work you have been doing before, and now
Yes.
they're scared.
Yeah, we haven't lost a case in over 20 years.
So they're scared, and they know that you are not someone to play with, and so they have to sit down. So tell me some of the big names, because I've read some incredible names that you have represented, starting with the great Aretha Franklin. Tell me a little bit, some episodes that you find very interesting for us.
Sure. I'll say the most interesting episode for me was starting with Phyllis Heyman, the former jazz artist, sophisticated lady on Broadway, she's known as. I was a 21-year-old in college, and I was promoting concerts and plays and about to go to law school. And I had been doing that music space for a while, as a child musician, as a high school musician, then college, then concerts, plays, step shows. I was doing all that stuff as a young man. And Phyllis Heyman pulled me aside and asked me, had I ever thought about entertainment law? And I didn't know what entertainment law was. I had never heard the word before. I was like, I'm going to go to law school and be a civil rights lawyer and fight for my people. And she said, well, that's nice, but we need African Americans to represent us as artists. So Phyllis was the first one. Then from Phyllis, I went to.
So she really started you.
Yeah, she really started.
The one who gave you poof,
the footprint. Yeah,
the
she gave
push to do that.
the push, yeah, the focus. And from there, it was Jamie Foxx, Shirley Caesar, gospel icon Hezekiah Walker, did a TV show with Patti LaBelle's people. Gosh, it's been so many. Leandria Johnson, Mickey Howard, the Clark sisters, Twinkie Clark, Freddie Jackson. I mean, I can go on and on. Freddie's a very dear friend. I helped Freddie for years. Take Six. It's just so many. When you ask that question, you kind of go blank because DMX, and then on the civil rights side, Dick Gregory's family, Malcolm X's family, MLK's family. I mean, we've worked with all the civil rights families in some capacity. So it's just been a very, very interesting, fascinating career. And I don't have any pictures on my wall. I don't have any, I'm not a guy that's got like all this stuff in his office. My office is very Spartan because I never want to focus on that. To me, there's so much more to do that I don't really sit around looking at things. People will stop me at different conferences and say, hey, you got me out of my deal 5 years ago. Hey, you did this for me 10 years ago. Hey, do you remember you negotiated? And half the time I'm like, between 4 kids and, 90 baseball games with one of my kids a year, I don't really remember all of the people, but the great ones like Aretha Franklin, Shirley Caesar, Patti LaBelle, Jamie Foxx, Freddie Jackson, Mickey Howard, Phyllis Heyman, that lineup, DMX, those ones are very special. Even Rick James, I was working on a book for Rick James before he died. Those kind of people are very, very special to me and very dear. Even Twinkie Clark for what she stands for in gospel music. And I did the deal for Lifetime to do their biopic. I helped with that deal. It was the highest rated show on Lifetime ever. They had 22 million people watch the Clark sister story. So we've had an incredible run. And it's only beginning to me. We're just really hitting that platform now, 20 years plus doing this. Now the next 20 years, we can really reshape the contracts and the landscape of this music thing we call the music industry. And I think a lot of the attorneys that might have thought we were crazy, year 5, now 20 years later, those same attorneys are calling me and saying, can you help me with this? Hey, I need to get out of this. Hey, I need to litigate this. I don't know how to litigate. Hey, this record label's giving us a hard time. I have a relationship over there. I can't rock the boat because I helped Maria with this label this way, but you can go in and rock the boat because that's what you do. So we're getting those kind of calls now. And even Take Six, as I said, selling the case for Take Six, a big acapella male group that we've helped now for over two years, I think. It's that kind of thing, just really helping people get out of bad situations or protect their music from bad situations where people steal their music and we step in and say, hey, we got to fix this. But those are the episodes.
Sorry?
I said those are the episodes that have really shaped my life. Working with Byrd on something with Rakim back in the day before Byrd passed. He was a big CPA, was one of my dearest friends. Working with Bill Krasilowski, who wrote the book This Business of Music, that a lot of us consider as the Bible of the music industry. It's a bestseller called This Business of Music. And then he had me write This Business of Urban Music as a spinoff to his book. And so we've been the #1 book, urban book under that brand for about a decade.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you next, because you have this book that outlines and highlights the important things that artists need to know. So this is like a textbook that you prepare, handbook that you prepare for artists to use.
Correct. And a lot of colleges use it in their classrooms. A lot of colleges use it. I know my buddies at Broadway State and some of my buddies in Connecticut, they've used it for their curriculum.
That is incredible. And this brings me to the next question, because apart from your legal career, you have made the point of helping advancement and mentoring young people who are interested in studying law. So tell me a little bit about your internship and the teaching and working.
Sure. We currently have 3 students working for us now from Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark in Atlanta. And we just added another student from American University Law School. And for me, I know when I was a student, it was the mentors that helped me get into entertainment law. It wasn't necessarily the law school or the undergraduate institute, Howard University, which is phenomenal, and where I started with the concerts and plays, but it was really the mentors, the lawyers who were entertainment lawyers who took the time to say, I'm going to show you how to go to do this, how to attend this conference. The gentleman we're burying this weekend, Kendall Minter, founded the Black Entertainment and Sports Lawyers Association. He was one of the founders. And he's a mentor of mine. I met him as a student. I was a student when I met him 30 years ago. And he took me under his wing. So for us, the mentorship program is important. We probably mentored over 20 years, 3 or 4 kids a year. So roughly about 100 kids have come through our law firm. And I would say the retention is about 95, 97%. Meaning the kids that come through, stay in touch with us, try to help them get jobs, try to bring them in on matters when they get their legal degree. It's probably about 90% of those kids will stay in touch with us. There are 5 or 10 that just realize this is not what I wanted to do. It's not what I thought it was. And we respect that. But the majority of them are at law schools now, like Howard, like American, UConn, Boston, Georgia State, Emory, John Marshall, GW. Our students are in all these law schools, and they're constantly hitting me up with, updates, success stories, internships they got. Can you write me a letter of recommendation? Can you write me this? Can you write me that? Can you do my bar letter? And we're just proud that we see our students out there just killing it. I got students at Nike. I have students at Sony. I got students at ABC, BET, Viacom, VH1, and other boutique law firms all over the country. And they'll just gradually send me a Christmas gift or a card or a note on Facebook or Instagram saying, you were there for me. Thank you for showing me the way. And even some I was tough on. They'll say, now I see why you were so tough on me. Because this is a very desirous area of law. Everybody wants to work with celebrities and entertainment and Broadway. So you have to get the students to understand you got to be on the top of your game. You're not going to get in here because you're beautiful or because you're popular, because you're handsome. You got to really know the ins and outs of this area to really be successful in it. I have this saying, Maria, there are about 100 to 200 people in Atlanta who say they're entertainment lawyers. There are probably 20 of us who actually do entertainment law and actually have a clientele. Somebody representing their sister or their local band is saying, I'm an entertainment lawyer. but there's a handful of us who actually do it. And that's what I try to teach these students, that you have to really master this area if you're going to do it.
And it's not the easy area to master.
No, because it's a hybrid of so many areas. When you represent a DMX, I'm doing his book deal. Matt Middleton's doing his music deal. Somebody else is doing a criminal matter. Someone else is doing a film matter for him in LA. Someone else is doing his estate work and planning. Someone else is doing his tax law. So if you're the lead entertainment lawyer, you've got to know these are all the areas that Maria is going to see as an entertainer of a certain net worth and a certain success. I got to be able to spot all these issues and be able to bring in the right lawyers as experts if I can't do the work myself. And that's really what I do. When I represent somebody very high profile, I might have 7 lawyers working with me on that given matter.
I mean, this conversation with you is even more fascinating than I was thinking about, that I was expecting. It's incredible. You open up so many different avenues to the young people. You changed the life of many, many young people in this way.
I appreciate that. I'm trying to pay it forward for those who've done it for me. Trying to just make sure I pay that back, you know, in serving these young people and older.
And talking about young people, let's talk about your young people, your family,
Yes.
your kids.
Right. The most important thing.
Yes. Tell me about them, because they're all amazing kids.
I've been very blessed. I have 3 biological children, and I have a daughter that I raised, so she calls me dad from when I was formerly married. But my kids are 2 lawyers, James Walker III, who's practicing law at Kirkland and Ellis, which is the #1 private equity firm doing mergers, acquisitions, all kind of private equity work. And then his sister Joy, the 2 middle children competing against each other. She's finishing Howard Law School with honors this spring, and she's going to go to the same firm he's at, but she'll be in their DC office. And then my oldest daughter, as I told you, it's my former, I guess technically I call it bonus daughter. She's having a baby in a few weeks, and she's a realtor and done very well in the real estate game. And then my baby boy plays baseball up in Connecticut, and he has his own home. What's fascinating about the kids is, in addition to just being great human beings, they're very entrepreneurial. They're very focused on what they're doing. So baby boy is 20, and he's already bought his first house. He's got 4 tenants living with him. He's playing on the baseball team. He's managing the house by himself up in Connecticut, doing the leases. This morning he called me and said, Dad, you'll get the spreadsheet for December with who paid what, their utilities, their oil bill, their lights, their insurance and everything. I guess he has the tenants paying their share of the utilities in addition to their rent. So he sends me an update every month. He collects the rents. He pays the mortgage himself, like 20 years old. So he's the youngest in our family to ever do that. And then his brother is 28, and he's a lawyer, as I told you. He has a home in DC and a home in Brooklyn. He rents out the home in DC with tenants, keeps a room for himself, and then he rents out the other part of the house, and then he has a place in Brooklyn. So he has 2 properties that he has at 28. And these, and these are, probably $1 million, $2 million properties, if you collectively add them up. So they've done very, very well as my 4 children. They're really out here just putting the work in. And the thing about good parenting, I always say, is you've done good parenting when you work. It's the only job you've done it well when you work yourself out of a job.
Yes.
That's good parenting. If they're still clinging to you and needing you every day and asking you this and that, you got some work to do. But when you're really, really, to me, this is just my opinion, I don't want to offend any parents out there, but for me, good parenting is when you work yourself out of a job.
It's I'm not a parent, so I can't, but it seems like that is the right thing, because if I don't need you, it means that you've given them the tools to be independent and to support themselves and to be their own people. So
my kids my young adults, I should say, they're not kids anymore. They will call me almost as a consultant.
yes.
Hey, Dad, I'm looking at this property. I need this much to put down. What do you think? I might want to borrow this from you, Dad, or I might want to wait till I get my advance from my job, my Christmas bonus money, all of that kind of stuff. But they typically on a day in, day out basis, and you almost feel unneeded. Like as a parent, you go through a withdrawal because you feel like gee, they don't need me no more, and you're texting, like, hey, do you guys need money? Or you need, no, we're good. Hey, you're traveling overseas. Do you need, no, I got to figure it out. Me and my girl are doing this. Me and my guy are doing this. Like, you feel like, wow, I made them almost too independent.
That's good though. It's wonderful. So
It's real talk.
on this beautiful note, and also on the fact that you're going to be a grandfather very soon,
Very soon.
this is going to be beautiful. It's their first grandchild. So it must be very exciting for you and for your daughter who's having the child.
I was very excited for my daughter, for their siblings, for her mother, my mother. All of us are very excited, and I'm trying to figure out what will he call me. What name are we going to give him? All of that stuff. But no, we're very excited. She's in Florida. I'll probably go down there in a couple of weeks when the birth comes. And I just thank God, for everything I've had, the children, the law career, the mentorship. I feel like I've lived the best career, the best family life. I don't have a single regret of anything. I feel like the arc of the story went just like I wanted it to go. And I've done practically everything you could want to do, either as an entertainment lawyer or on Broadway, being an MJ. I feel like I've come in, at the top notch in every game that I'm in. So now it's just maintaining it and setting up things for these grandchildren, setting up, certain financial resources for them and real estate for them, and just make sure they have what they need as grandchildren, even though their parents are much more well off than I was in their 20s.
Yeah.
I was raised by my mother, who I should give credit as well. My single mother in Connecticut raised me, but we didn't have a lot growing up, and that drove us to try to get what we have now. These kids are pretty blessed, but they're humble kids. They're hardworking. And I think that's probably the cliche, your proudest accomplishment is your children. It is truly, truly the truth that of everything I've been able to do. When I see other peers in the industry say, man, my kids are struggling, or they're not motivated, or they don't want to go for it, I'm very grateful to God that something their mother and my mother and the village, something we did right, that all four of these kids are like so driven. Just really, the baseball player, just an example, I said to him in January, I said, you find a house, I'll help you get it. By March, he called me in Connecticut and said, Dad, I hired an agent. We've looked at 4 houses. I need to put a bid in. 20-year-old kid, just turned 20. And so I went up there in May, and we closed on a house May 4th for him. And
I remember you were talking about that in London.
When we were in London, I said, I flew back. Matter of fact, I flew back from London for the closing. You're right. The day I got back from London, I went straight to Connecticut and started working on his house deal. So these kids are so driven that sometimes I want them to breathe a little. I'm saying, okay, breathe, enjoy it a moment. But they're so locked in that it almost scares you.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is beautiful. It's so inspiring for me to feel your energy, your positivity, your gratefulness, especially in the moment in which I told you I'm not.
Yes, I'm praying for you. Yes, I'm praying for you.
I'm really thankful that we had this conversation, which is we really got over time. But that's okay, because it's beautiful what we're seeing, and I'm sure that the viewers who are gonna watch this conversation we had, they're gonna be as inspired as I am, if not more. So,
well, I want to say thank you to you. You spent quite a bit of time with me in London. I think we were there for a week with Stephen and Alia. And I typically don't talk about any of this. I think the whole time I was with you, I probably didn't talk to you about any of this.
Yeah.
But typically don't talk about it because I focus on going ahead, what we got to do.
You don't have time to talk. You only have to act.
When I hear it out loud, sometimes it sounds almost unbelievable, when you get it out loud. But when I hear it out loud, it makes me more grateful to God and grateful to my mother, that I don't do all of it without the favor of God, as well as the support and foundation of my mother and uncles and grandparents and children and everybody else. So I thank you for giving me this platform to allow me to remind myself to be grateful and to publicly say those things, because I don't think you can say it enough. I don't think you can thank those people enough. And I still got a lot of work to do, and I won't stop. We got a lot of cases to do and artists to represent, but I do want to take a pause to say thank you.
Thank you for this, wonderful. And thank you to our viewers. We see you next Saturday, 12:30 on Spectrum. And when you want to re-watch these episodes, go to my YouTube channel, My Harlem Portraits, and there you have all the episodes of our conversations. Thank you again, James Walker Jr. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.